Stop. Before you decide whether to watch this, I need you to answer one question honestly. When was the last time you checked your actual bank balance? Not a vague sense of what's in there, not a rough number you carry in your head, the real number. When did you last look at it directly? If there was a hesitation before you answered, even a fraction of a second, this video is about you. Here's the thing, you're not going to find the usual content here. No budgeting tips, no 10 habits of wealthy people, none of that. What I'm going to show you today is why you already know everything you need to know about money, and why that knowledge has done almost nothing for you. Why the gap between what you understand and what you actually do keeps getting wider. And why that gap is not a discipline problem, it's a psychology problem, a deep one that was installed in you before you were old enough to know it was happening. And here is the part that should hold you here. By the end of this video, you will see a specific mechanism running inside you, right now, today, that has been costing you money every single day for years. Not a concept, a mechanism, with a name, a structure, and a specific origin you can trace. Most people who see it never unsee it. Stay with me. If you are interested in this topic, type "I am ready" in the comment right now. Just comment "I am ready." When I see your comment, I will give you a heart. And if you want to help the channel, leave a like and subscribe. It takes less than a second and helps the channel a lot. I want to describe your life back to you, and I want you to notice, really notice, what happens in your body as I do it. There is a financial notification you have been aware of and not opened. It might be a bank alert, an email from a creditor, a statement. It arrived days ago, maybe longer. You've seen it exist, you haven't looked at it. And the most revealing thing about this is that you don't experience it as avoidance. You experience it as, "I'll get to that. It's just not the right moment yet." The right moment never comes, because you are not waiting for time. You are waiting for the courage to feel what the number will make you feel. You have made a budget at least once, possibly many times. The first attempt felt significant, like finally taking yourself seriously. It worked for a period, then it didn't. Then it lived in a folder or an app untouched, neither deleted nor used, which is exactly how we treat things we feel guilty about but can't face removing. You know the names of your debts. You do not know the exact balances. There is a specific, deliberate vagueness that you maintain around your own numbers, a kind of willful imprecision that feels like busyness but is actually protection. You have had the thought, more than once, across different years in different circumstances, "I'll get serious about money when things calm down." You may have been waiting for things to calm down for longer than you can easily admit right now, and somewhere behind that phrase lives a belief you have never fully examined, that financial stability is something that arrives, that it is given to you by circumstances rather than built through behavior, that waiting is a strategy. It is not a strategy, it's a symptom. And then this one, the one that is hardest to see clearly because it is everywhere. You use money to manage your emotional states. Stress produces spending. Boredom produces spending. Celebration produces spending. Grief produces spending. The emotion varies, the solution stays the same. Money has become the answer to every question your nervous system asks, which means that every feeling you have is also, structurally, a financial event. Comment "stuck" right now if you just recognized yourself in more than two of those, not as a confession, as an acknowledgement that you're paying attention. Here is what I need you to hold on to before we go further. Every single pattern I just described is rational. Every one of them. A logical, functional response to something real that happened inside your psychology. You are not broken, you are not weak. You are running a set of programs that were written for you by your past, and you have never been shown how to see them clearly enough to rewrite them. That changes now. Let's go beneath the surface, and let's go further than most financial content is willing to go. Your brain, right now while you watch this, is not trying to make you wealthy. It has never been trying to make you wealthy. The brain has one assignment: keep you alive and reduce pain in the present moment. Wealth is a future state. The future is abstract. Abstract things do not trigger survival responses, but financial anxiety, that tight, low-grade signal of something is wrong, triggers an immediate response. The brain reads it as threat, and when the brain reads threat, it does not reach for a spreadsheet, it reaches for relief. Here is what that relief looks like in practice. A coffee, a scroll, a small purchase that interrupts the anxiety signal for about 20 minutes. The brain registers the behavior worked, and it files it for next time. What you experience as impulse spending, the brain experiences as effective pain management. That is not a character flaw. That is a perfectly functional loop running in an environment it was never designed for. Now pay attention to this, because this is the thing most people never consciously register. You have made financial decisions you knew were wrong while you were making them. You felt it, that simultaneous awareness of, this is a bad idea, and I'm doing it anyway. And afterward, you've looked at yourself and asked, what is wrong with me? Why can't I stop? Here is the answer. Nothing is wrong with you. Two completely separate systems made two different decisions. The rational system, which runs slowly, uses a lot of energy, and requires concentration, understood that the decision was bad. The emotional system, which is faster, older, and consumes almost no energy, had already decided. By the time your rational mind finished its analysis, the emotional decision was made. The rational mind didn't override it, it narrated it. And then you said, I'll stop doing this, and the next time the trigger fired, the exact same sequence ran again. Because the problem was never understanding, the problem was the system. Psychologists call the emotional system's behavior temporal discounting. The further a reward is in time, the less motivating it feels. Your financial security at 65 is real, but it has essentially zero emotional weight compared to the feeling of immediate relief in your hands right now. This isn't weakness, it is wiring. And it is wiring that the entire consumer economy was built specifically to exploit. But here is the piece that goes deeper than all of that. Money is not a number to you. It never has been. Money is a feeling. Several feelings, actually, collapsed into one word. Money means safety, or its absence. Money means love, because in the house you grew up in, money was either present or absent in ways that shaped how held you felt. Money means worth. Money means the particular shame of not having enough. Money means the voice that asks, who do you think you are when you try to ask for more? These meanings were built into you before you could reason about them, before you had any choice. And because money carries all of those charges simultaneously, any financial interaction, checking a balance, opening a statement, having a money conversation, activates all of them at once. The statement is not a piece of paper. It is a door. And behind that door is every version of fear and shame and inadequacy that money has ever produced in your life. No wonder you don't open it. The avoidance is not irrational. It is the most rational thing the brain knows how to do with a door that leads to that much pain. The devastating irony, the part that actually destroys financial lives, is that the problem behind the door does not care whether you look at it. It grows in the dark. Every month you don't open the statement, the numbers change, not in your favor. The longer you avoid, the worse it gets. The worse it gets, the more terrifying it becomes to look. The more terrifying it is to look, the stronger the avoidance. That spiral, right there, is the engine. Not bad luck, not poor character, a loop between fear and avoidance spinning silently every single day. And now I want to show you exactly where that loop was built. This is the part of this conversation that most financial content doesn't have the nerve to go into, because it requires looking at something uncomfortable, not just at yourself, but at the people and institutions that formed you. Go back, not literally, but mentally. Go back to the house you grew up in, and ask yourself one question. When money came up, what happened to the air in the room? For most people, the answer falls into one of three categories. Silence. Money simply wasn't discussed. It existed in the background as an invisible pressure, but it was never named, never explained, never taught. The silence itself was the lesson. This is not something we talk about openly. This is dangerous territory. Children who grow up in this silence become adults who feel vaguely panicked when money becomes the subject of a direct conversation. They don't know why, they just feel it. Tension. Money came up and everything changed. Voices got tight, words were said that wouldn't have been said otherwise. The child watching absorbed a direct association. Money equals conflict. Money equals the worst versions of people I love. Those children become adults who avoid financial conversations, with partners, with themselves, with advisors, not because they don't care, but because every financial conversation activates the memory of what those conversations cost. Scarcity, not just the fact of not having enough, but the identity of not having enough. The unspoken belief absorbed through hundreds of small moments over years that this is what life looks like for people like us, that wanting more is naive, that trying to build something different is a form of self-deception, that the floor is the floor. That third lesson is the most damaging, and it is the most invisible, because it doesn't arrive as a statement, it arrives as an atmosphere, and atmospheres feel like reality.
Here is what that atmosphere produces in an adult. A raise is on the table. The negotiation doesn't happen, not because the person doesn't know they should negotiate, but because some part of them, deeper than logic, asks, "Who do you think you are?" A windfall arrives, a bonus, a tax return, an unexpected sum, and it's gone within weeks, not recklessly, just dispersed, because holding money produces an anxiety that spending resolves. Because money in the hand has always felt like money about to disappear, because the unconscious belief is, this isn't really mine to keep. This is the scarcity mindset, but mindset is too gentle a word for it. This is a set of beliefs about what you deserve, assigned to you before you could evaluate them, running at a level below your daily awareness, actively shaping every financial decision you make. And the cruelest part is that it doesn't feel like a belief. It feels like a clear-eyed assessment of reality. Now, here is the part that should make you genuinely angry. You spent 12 years inside a compulsory educational system, 12 years of structured, mandatory instruction in subjects deemed essential for functioning as a citizen in modern society. And in those 12 years, nobody taught you what a credit score was, how compound interest worked, what the difference between an asset and a liability was, how wages are set or negotiated, what inflation means for a savings account, or how an investment grows over time. 12 years, 0 hours on the mechanics of the system you would spend your entire adult life navigating. Ask yourself, right now, genuinely, what that silence communicates. It communicates that financial understanding is not for ordinary people, that it is either inherited, passed through families that already have it, or it belongs to professionals, specialists, people in a different category from you. The school system sorted you into people who are good at certain things, and it never placed you into a category called person who understands how money works, because that category in the curriculum did not exist. And then you graduated into that gap, and the most sophisticated commercial targeting infrastructure ever built stepped directly into it. Every platform you use knows more about your desires, fears, and emotional triggers than you do. They have mapped your psychology through billions of data points, and they have engineered environments designed, down to the millisecond of scroll time, the specific placement of buttons, the color of a buy now prompt, to convert your emotions into transactions before your rational mind can intervene. You were systematically left without financial education, and then handed tools designed to exploit exactly that absence. That is not an accident. That is architecture. And here is the thing that most financial content refuses to say directly. Financial illiteracy is an asset, not to you, to the institutions that profit from confusion. A population that understands debt can resist predatory debt. A population that understands compound interest does not pay minimum balances for decades. A population that understands wealth building does not stay dependent on wage labor for 5 generations. The ignorance has a value, and it is maintained. Sit with that for a moment, because what comes next is where all of this connects. Everything I've described so far is structure: the family conditioning, the educational gap, the commercial exploitation. These are the bones of the system. But the system runs on fuel, specific emotional fuel, and until you can name it, you cannot stop it from burning. The first fuel is fear, not general anxiety, a specific fear that is almost never named directly. It is the fear of knowing. Let that sit for a second. Not fear of losing money, not fear of failure, the fear of finding out how bad it already is, of opening the account and seeing a number that confirms the thing you've been quietly suspecting about yourself, that you are further behind than you've admitted to yourself, that the version of your life you've been imagining is further from the version you're living than you can tolerate knowing. That is why the app goes unopened. That is why the statement gets filed without reading. Not laziness, not disorganization, the specific, rational terror of information that cannot be unfelt once it is felt. Fear does something very precise to financial behavior. It disguises itself as caution. It makes inaction feel like wisdom. It makes avoidance feel like patience. It makes the decision to not decide feel like the safest decision available. And in that disguise, it runs undetected for years, sometimes for entire financial lifetimes, costing compounding returns that can never be recovered, and calling itself prudence the whole time. Every year of hiding has a number attached to it, a real number. The year you spent called waiting to get serious had a cost, not a motivational metaphor, an actual dollar figure representing what that year of non-investment, non-negotiation, non-engagement cost in compounded returns. Fear charges interest. It just never sends you a statement.
Comment stuck if you've been waiting for the right moment, and then ask yourself, in the comments or just in your own head, how many years you've been waiting. The second fuel is comfort, and this is the sneakiest one. Because comfort doesn't look like a financial problem. It looks like being human. It looks like treating yourself. It looks like the reasonable choice to do the thing that feels better right now, after a day that was hard. And all of those framings are true. The problem is not the comfort itself. The problem is what the comfort is replacing. Most financially stuck people are not lazy, they work. Many of them work constantly. What they are is chronically stressed, operating under a low-level nervous system alarm that comes from sustained financial pressure. And when the nervous system is in sustained alarm, relief is not a preference, it feels like survival. The $30 meal delivery is not an indulgence, it is the only thing that reliably makes the hum stop for 20 minutes. That is not a character flaw, that is a nervous system doing exactly what nervous systems do. But here is the mechanism that nobody tells you about. The comfort spending that relieves the anxiety is simultaneously adding to the financial pressure that produces the anxiety. The anxiety creates the spending deepens the anxiety. The deeper anxiety demands more relief. The cycle is not metaphorical. It runs on measurable financial numbers that compound over time, and the person inside it experiences it as, I just can't seem to get ahead. Something always comes up. I try, and nothing changes. Nothing changes because the solution and the problem are the same behavior. The third fuel, and this is the one that almost nobody in personal finance will say directly: validation. You do not make financial decisions alone. Nobody does. Every financial choice you make happens inside a social context, inside a web of relationships and identities and belonging and fear of rejection that is older and stronger than any financial goal you've ever set. And in most social environments, the financially stuck pattern is not the exception, it is the norm. It is the culture. talking about being broke is a form of solidarity. Spending freely is a form of being real, being present, being the kind of person who doesn't let money be more important than living. And the person who starts making different choices, who declines the dinner, who stops buying rounds, who says, "I'm saving right now," that person is not celebrated. They are viewed with suspicion, sometimes with resentment, and sometimes, particularly in communities built around shared hardship, with the specific hostility reserved for people who are seen to be trying to leave. "You've changed. You think you're better than us now. What are you saving for? You can't take it with you." These sentences are sometimes said with love. They are always, underneath, a command to return to the group's established normal. And because belonging, real belonging, the kind you grew up with, the kind tied to your deepest sense of identity, is not something most people are willing to sacrifice for a financial goal, most people comply. They spend the money they should have saved. They stay recognizable, and they feel, privately, the specific pain of wanting something they can't admit they want to the people who matter most to them. Be honest with yourself right now. How much of your financial behavior is about money, and how much is about not losing the people you love? I want you to stop, and I want you to see something as a complete picture for the first time. A family that taught you, not with cruelty but with the ordinary mechanics of how stress and poverty shape households, that money is either a source of shame, conflict, or a ceiling that doesn't move. A school that handed you 12 years of mandatory education and deliberately left out the single subject that would have equipped you to navigate the system you were being graduated into. An advertising and consumer economy that spent decades and billions of dollars studying your psychology, mapping your emotional vulnerabilities, and engineering environments designed to convert your unresolved feelings into transactions. And a social environment that defines financial ambition as a form of betrayal and financial struggle as a form of authenticity. Every single one of those forces is pushing in the same direction, and that direction is a person who does not build wealth. Now ask yourself, does this look like a coincidence? Because here's what a person shaped by all of those forces looks like. They avoid financial information, they spend emotionally, they don't negotiate, they don't invest, they don't accumulate. And when their financial situation is exactly what those forces designed it to be, they blame themselves. They say, "I don't have enough discipline, I'm not smart enough about money, I just can't seem to get it together." And they try harder and fail again, and try harder. And the system that produced the outcome watches, completely protected, while the person it caught spends their energy in self-examination. That self-blame is not accidental, it is load-bearing. Without it, the system is visible. With it, the system is invisible, and what is visible instead is a personal failure narrative that keeps the person looking inward rather than outward. Now, let me show you what this system costs in actual numbers. The average person managing emotional states with small purchases, the unplanned food delivery, the impulse item, the "I needed this" transaction that appears in the account without a clear memory attached, spends conservatively $40 to $60 per day on purchases that were not planned and not necessary. Call it $50. $50 a day is $18,250 a year. Invested at 7% annually, a conservative historical market return over 20 years, that becomes $944,000, nearly $1 million. Not lost to a single disaster, not stolen, not the result of one catastrophic decision, transferred in increments of $20 to $50 through the daily management of feelings that a system created and an economy profited from. That is the cost of the trap, per person, per lifetime. And the trap doesn't require a villain. It doesn't need a conspiracy or a meeting or anyone acting with conscious malice. It needs exactly 3 things: a population that was never taught how money works, an economy that profits from that ignorance, and a cultural story that calls the outcome personal failure. All three have been in place continuously for generations. The system runs itself. Here is the line I want you to sit with before we move on, and this is the most uncomfortable thing I'm going to say in this entire video. The story where you are the problem is a story the system needs you to tell, because as long as you are the problem, the system is never the problem, and a system that is never examined is a system that never changes. This is not about removing your responsibility. Your choices are real, their consequences are real, but responsibility held without context is just punishment, and punishment produces shame, and shame, as we've already established, produces the exact avoidance behaviors that keep the loop running. What I'm offering instead is the complete story. You were conditioned by specific forces in a specific sequence, producing a specific and entirely predictable set of behaviors. The conditioning was not your fault. What you do with the awareness of it, that part is yours. Comment "stuck" if this feels like more than a personal story right now. Everything I've described lives inside real lives. Let me show you what it looks like. David is 34. He earns enough, not lavishly, but genuinely enough that on paper his life should be different from what it is. He has been enough for 8 years. In 8 years, he has never held more than $800 in savings for more than 3 weeks. There is always something. He could not tell you precisely what the somethings are. He knows they happen. The money arrives and the money leaves, and the account settles at a number that does not reflect the income. Every January, David builds a budget. He is meticulous about it. Color-coded, categorized. On paper, he should be saving $400 a month. He has never saved $400 in a month. The budget lives in a folder he stops opening by March. From the outside, no discipline. From the inside, something else entirely. David grew up in a house where the sound of money trouble was the sound of his parents at midnight, raised voices carrying through walls, the specific atmosphere of a household under financial pressure, the tension before the bills arrived, the silence after the argument, the way everything felt slightly unsafe from the first of the month until the paycheck. He was 7 years old the first time he understood that money meant something was about to go wrong. The spreadsheet is not a spreadsheet to David. It is a door to that feeling. His nervous system identified it before his conscious mind finished loading the file. Every time he opens it, something tightens in his chest that has nothing to do with the numbers and everything to do with what numbers have always meant in his life. So the file stays closed. Not because David doesn't care, because caring about money has always felt exactly like waiting for the floor to drop. David doesn't need better financial habits. He needs to understand why his body treats financial information as a threat. That is a different problem. It has a different solution. Now meet Keisha, 28, sharper than most people she knows. She knows that about herself, not arrogantly, just accurately. She has a clear picture of what her next financial move should be. She has had this picture for 2 years. She has researched it. She has the notes. She is by every measure prepared. She has not moved. When people ask, she says she's almost ready. The timing isn't quite right. The conditions need to be a little cleaner. A few more things need to settle first. The plan has been 2 to 4 months from execution for 24 consecutive months. What is actually happening?
Keisha grew up in an environment where trying in public was a transaction. You put your ambition on the table where everyone could see it, and if it didn't work, the failure was also public and permanent and became the thing that followed you. She watched this happen to people she respected. She saw how the community remembered. She absorbed, not as a lesson taught, but as a pattern observed, the specific cost of visible failure among people who already had reasons to doubt you. So she keeps the plan private until she's certain, keeps preparing until the risk feels manageable, which it never quite does, because the fear is not really about the plan failing. The fear is about being seen as someone who believed she could do it and then couldn't, about having her hope become evidence against her. Keisha is not afraid of failure. She is afraid of being witnessed failing. That is a more specific and more paralyzing fear, and it presents itself to her not as fear at all. It presents itself as pragmatism, patience, being realistic. She has been realistic for 2 years.
And Marcus, 41, more money now than he imagined he'd ever earn, and still behind. The income expanded and the lifestyle found it immediately, like water finding its level. He doesn't know with precision where it goes, he knows what comes in. The balance doesn't reflect it. From the outside, lifestyle inflation, financial irresponsibility. From the inside, pay attention here because this one is the most important. Marcus grew up with the specific shame of visible poverty, not poverty in general, the particular embodied experience of being visibly, recognizably poor in front of other people. The shoes, the apartment, the moments that children understand without being told they will not forget. He made a decision somewhere in that childhood, not consciously, not as a stated resolution, but as a cellular commitment that he would never be visibly poor again. The emphasis on visibly, not feel poor, not be poor, look poor, be seen as poor. So every purchase is evidence. The car is evidence. The clothes are evidence. The restaurant is evidence. Each one is a message sent backward to the 12-year-old version of himself through the only language that 12-year-old would have believed. I made it. I'm not that anymore. I'm safe. The money is not buying things. The money is buying the right to not be who he was. No budget touches that. No financial plan addresses it. The advice that tells Marcus to cut back is not wrong as math, it is useless as psychology. Because it asks him to stop doing the only thing that at a level below conscious thought makes him feel like the story of his childhood isn't still true. Be honest right now. Which of these three people do you see yourself in? Not which one you prefer to be, which one you actually recognize. There are two structures that hold everything in place, and I want to be specific about them because until you can see a mechanism clearly, you cannot interrupt it. The first is the habit loop. Here is how it actually works. Every habitual behavior runs on a three-part sequence: a cue, a routine, and a reward. The cue is any signal, a feeling, a time of day, an environment, a person, that triggers the behavior automatically. The routine is the behavior. The reward is what the brain receives from completing it, which reinforces the entire sequence and makes it more automatic over time. The word that matters there is automatic. Automatic means happening before conscious choice. You are feeling the low hum of financial anxiety. Before your conscious mind has decided anything, your hand is already moving toward the app, toward the food delivery, toward the purchase. The decision happened before the decision. The rational mind arrives to find the transaction already in progress, and it does what it always does when it arrives late. It explains. I needed this. It was a good price. I worked hard today. Those explanations are not the reason for the behavior. They are the story constructed after the behavior ran on its own. And this is the reason telling yourself to just be better doesn't work. You are trying to override a process that completed before you could intervene. Willpower is a conscious tool. Habits are not conscious. They are below consciousness. They bypass the decision-making layer entirely and run on hardware that predates it. The only way to change a habit loop is to work at the level of the loop. Find the cue, interrupt the sequence before the routine fires, substitute a different behavior that delivers a similar reward. This is slow, specific, and genuinely difficult work, but it is the right work. Everything else is performance, the performance of trying to change while the loop keeps running underneath. The second structure is more dangerous because it is quieter and because it looks from the inside completely reasonable. It is called learned helplessness. Martin Seligman discovered it in a simple, devastating experiment. Animals placed in situations where their behavior had no effect on their outcomes, where they tried different things and nothing worked, and the results stayed the same regardless of what they did, eventually stopped trying entirely. Not because they lacked capability, because they had learned from sufficient evidence a belief about the nature of their situation. What I do does not change what happens to me.
And then when the situation changed, when escape was genuinely available, they didn't move. They stayed. Because the belief had become more real than the reality. In financial stuckness, this pattern is everywhere, and it does not come from laziness. It comes from a specific sequence of trying and failing that would exhaust anyone. The budget that didn't hold, the savings that an emergency consumed, the raise that didn't come, the plan that fell apart, the attempt made in genuine good faith that produced the same result as no attempt at all. Try enough times with the same outcome, and the mind does exactly what it's designed to do. It learns, it concludes, it stops sending you into situations that history says will hurt you. Learned financial helplessness sounds exactly like this. Something always comes up. I've tried before. It doesn't work for people like me. Maybe I'm just not built for this. Some people are just meant to struggle. These are not weak excuses. These are rational conclusions drawn from real evidence by a mind trying to protect you from further pain. And here is what makes it a trap. Learned helplessness removes the one thing that change requires before anything else can happen, the belief that change is possible. You cannot build toward a future you have concluded is not available to you. You can perform the motions, you can make the budget and save the articles and watch the videos, but underneath that performance is a current of resignation so deep and so well earned that it dismantles each new effort before it can accumulate into anything real. The work does not start with better strategies. It starts with dismantling the evidence base for the belief that strategies don't work. Comment stuck if you've stopped trying at something financial because the evidence convinced you it wouldn't matter, because I want you to know that experience is real, the pain that produced it was real, and the conclusion it drew is the most understandable thing in the world, and still wrong about what's possible for you now. There is one more layer, and it might be the one that is hardest to see, not because it's hidden, but because it is so completely everywhere that it registers as background reality rather than active force. Being broke is normal, not just common, not just frequent, culturally normal, meaning it is the assumed baseline, the unmarked condition, the water. Financial struggle is what content is written for. It is what humor is built around. "I'm so broke" is said at dinner parties as a form of connection. It is a way of signaling, I am real, I am not putting on airs, I am one of you. And in environments built on shared hardship, this signal performs something genuinely important. It maintains belonging. It keeps the group intact. I am not dismissing that. Solidarity is real. The bonds formed in shared difficulty are real. But here is what I need you to see alongside that. When broke is the cultural norm, not broke is a form of social deviance. When spending freely is what authentic people do, saving deliberately is what uptight people do. When financial struggle is the price of being real, financial ambition is a kind of performance, trying to be something you're not, trying to escape something you should have the dignity to accept. And so the person who starts saving, who turns down the dinner, who stops buying rounds, who says, "I'm working on my finances right now," does not receive support. They receive friction. You've changed. You used to be fun. What's the point of money if you never enjoy it? You think you're better than where you came from. These comments are not delivered by enemies. They are delivered by people who love you, by the community that formed you and held you and is genuinely, if confusedly, trying to keep you. And because the need to belong to that community is not abstract, it is the need for your actual people, your actual history, your actual sense of who you are. Most people do not choose the financial goal over the belonging. They drift back, the ambition goes quiet, the spending resumes, and they feel, privately and chronically, the specific suffering of wanting something they can't let themselves want in front of the people they love.
The phrase goes, "You are the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." This is usually read as, "Find better friends." That reading is both reductive and cruel. It misses the actual mechanism. The people around you don't change your behavior through advice or pressure. They change it by defining what is normal. And normal behavior requires no decision. Normal behavior is what you do without thinking, because everyone around you does it, because it is simply the water. To change financially is to change what your nervous system experiences as normal, and that is one of the hardest things a human being can do, because normal is not just a habit, it is an identity, it is belonging, it is the ground beneath you. Most people never identify this as the obstacle. They call it something else: lack of discipline, lack of motivation, bad luck. But the real obstacle is that the change they want would cost them something that matters more in the present moment than the future they say they want. That is not a character flaw. That is a human being navigating an impossible trade-off that nobody named for them.
I need to say something clearly before we go further, because everything I've described could leave a person feeling more confirmed in their helplessness than when they started. That would be the opposite of what this video is for. Understanding the system is not an excuse, it is a location, and location is the only thing that makes navigation possible. Here is the difference between shame and insight, because these two things look identical from the outside and produce completely opposite outcomes on the inside. Shame says, "I see this pattern and it means something about who I am." Insight says, "I see this pattern and now I know what produced it." Shame immobilizes. It collapses the person into the problem. It produces the avoidance behaviors we've been discussing, because the most efficient way to escape shame is to stop looking at the thing that produces it. Insight creates distance. It puts you outside the pattern rather than inside it, and from outside the pattern, you can finally see it clearly enough to interrupt it. This is not a small distinction. It is the entire difference between change and the performance of change. Most people who are financially stuck have not been lacking effort. They have been applying effort from inside shame, trying to override patterns they can't see clearly, with willpower that the patterns keep consuming, blaming themselves for the failures that shame produces. The effort is real. The direction is wrong. What changes when you see the pattern clearly? First, it becomes specific. Not, "I'm bad with money," which is too large and too personal to address, but "my nervous system has associated financial information with threat since childhood, and I have been practicing avoidance for so long it is now my default response." That is a specific, addressable, interruption-capable thing. You can work with that. You cannot work with, "I'm bad with money." That is a verdict, not a diagnosis. Second, the timeline becomes honest. These patterns were not built in a month. They were reinforced thousands of times over years, sometimes decades. They are not going to reverse in 30 days because you read an article or watched a video or made a plan. They are going to change the way all deeply grooved habits change, through specific, patient, imperfect, repeated practice. Through weeks where the loop fires anyway, and days where the old behavior runs anyway, and moments where the avoidance wins again, and the decision to continue practicing anyway. Relapse is not failure. Relapse is where the loop is strongest, which means relapse is exactly the information you need. Third, the question changes, and this is the most important thing in this entire video. The question, "Why don't I have more discipline?" is a question that will never produce anything useful. It assumes the problem is character. It guarantees the answer is self-criticism. And self-criticism, as we've now established in detail, produces the exact patterns you are trying to stop. The question that produces movement is this: what am I protecting myself from? What is the specific fear that the avoidance is guarding? What is the wound that the spending is medicating? What is the belief about who you are, about what you deserve, about what is possible for people like you that the short-term thinking is acting on?
Because when you can answer those questions with curiosity rather than shame, you have something real, a specific thing, not a character flaw to defeat, but a belief to examine, not a weakness to overcome, but a protection that has outlived the threat it was built for. Be honest with yourself, and I mean genuinely honest, the kind that is uncomfortable. What are you protecting yourself from when you don't look at your money? Comment "stuck" if something just shifted for you, not because you fixed anything, because you've seen something. I want to end somewhere specific. Every single pattern in this video, the avoidance, the emotional spending, the learned helplessness, the social compliance, the frozen ambition, every one of them is a form of protection. The brain built each one to shield you from a specific pain. At some point in your history, that protection was the right response. You were young. The tools weren't there. The environment was what it was. Looking away was the most adaptive thing available. But you are not in that environment right now, and the protection that kept you functional then is keeping you stuck now. It is costly and invisible and running without your permission, spending resources you need for something else.
The financially stuck person is almost never who the culture portrays. They are not careless. They are not unintelligent. They are not simply lacking the drive that other people have. They are someone who learned from real experience in a real environment with real consequences that certain things were dangerous, and they have been organized around that learning ever since, quietly, expensively, without anyone ever naming it clearly enough that they could decide whether it still needed to be true. You are not your financial history. The history is data. Data about the environment that formed you and the adaptations it required. It is not a sentence. It is not a prediction. And it is absolutely not a fixed characteristic of who you are. Here is the question I want to leave you with. Actually sit with it. Don't just read through it. If you removed shame from your relationship with money completely for 30 days as an experiment and replaced it entirely with curiosity, what would you see? What patterns would suddenly make sense? What fears would finally have names? What beliefs about yourself and money and what's possible would become visible for the first time? Because the thing you see when you ask that question honestly, that is where the real work starts. Not with a budget, not with an investment account, not with another YouTube video about financial habits, with the specific, honest, shame-free answer to the question, what has this been protecting me from, and do I still need that protection? Drop "stuck" in the comments if this landed somewhere real for you, not for the algorithm, because naming it matters. Because the moment you say, "I see the pattern," even just as a word in a comment, even just to yourself, is the moment the pattern loses its invisibility, and invisible patterns are the only ones that can run forever. Seen patterns can be changed. I'll see you in the next one.